I never thought a blanket could change everything. But that night at the bonfire, when Caspian draped that worn fleece over my shoulders and then quietly sat down beside me, sharing the warmth without asking permission, something fundamental shifted in my chest. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about one perfect moment. It's about all the small moments that led up to it, all the times I told myself I was imagining things, all the nights I lay awake wondering if what I felt was real or just wishful thinking. I met Caspian 3 months ago at a mutual friend's housewarming party. I almost didn't go. It was a Friday night, and I'd had a brutal week at work, the kind where you question every life choice that led you to your current job. But my friend Marcus had been texting me all week, insisting I needed to get out more, that I was becoming a hermit, that there would be interesting people there. I should mention that Marcus knew I was gay. I'd come out to my close friends 2 years earlier, though I still wasn't particularly open about it. It wasn't shame exactly, more like I just hadn't figured out how to be comfortable in that identity yet. I'd had one relationship in college that ended badly, and since then I'd been in this weird holding pattern, not really putting myself out there, not really trying. So I showed up at Marcus's new place with a bottle of wine and low expectations. The apartment was packed with people I mostly didn't know, that typical mix of friends and co-workers and random plus ones. I was doing my usual thing at parties, finding a corner near the kitchen where I could look occupied while nursing a drink, when I heard this laugh. Not a polite party chuckle, but a real, unguarded laugh that somehow cut through all the ambient noise. I looked over, and there he was, tall, maybe 6'1", with dark curly hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it all day, wearing a forest green Henley that brought out these flecks of gold in his brown eyes. I noticed the eyes later. In that first moment, I just noticed the laugh, and the way he seemed completely at ease in his own skin. His name was Caspian. I learned this when Marcus dragged me over to meet him about 20 minutes later. "You two have to meet," Marcus said with that tone that made me wonder if he was trying to set us up or just being his usual social butterfly self. Caspian just moved here from Portland. He's a graphic designer, works from home, total creative genius. Caspian rolled his eyes good-naturedly at this introduction. "Marcus is exaggerating," he said, extending his hand. "I make logos for startups. It's not exactly genius work." His handshake was firm and warm, and he held eye contact just a beat longer than necessary. Or maybe I imagined that. I was already hyper-aware of everything about him, which was unusual for me. I'm typically pretty good at playing it cool. We ended up talking for almost an hour. It was one of those conversations that flows effortlessly, where you keep discovering unexpected common ground. We both loved the same obscure indie bands. We'd both read the same weird science fiction novel and had strong opinions about its ending. He'd grown up in Seattle, just like me, though we'd gone to different high schools. At some point, someone turned up the music and the party got louder, more chaotic, and Caspian leaned in closer to be heard. I could smell his cologne, something woody and subtle, and I had to actively stop myself from leaning in further. When the party started winding down, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. "There's this place near me that does an incredible pour-over," he said, "if you're into that kind of thing." I was into that kind of thing. I was into any kind of thing if it meant seeing him again. That coffee turned into a 3-hour conversation where we completely lost track of time. Then there was a farmer's market on Sunday where we wandered around trying samples, and he bought fresh flowers for his apartment, something I found inexplicably charming. A movie the following week, some indie film at the Art House Theatre where we sat in the back, and he whispered commentary that made me try not to laugh out loud. Dinner at a Thai place where we argued playfully about whether the green curry or the Penang was superior. He was Team Penang. I was wrong, apparently, for preferring green curry. But he said it with such a teasing smile that I didn't mind being wrong. Here's the thing, though. I couldn't figure out if these were dates or if we were just becoming friends. Caspian never said anything explicitly romantic. He never made a move. We didn't talk about relationships or dating or sexuality. It was all just easy and comfortable and fun, and I was terrified of misreading the situation. I'd been down that road before, catching feelings for a straight friend, and I didn't want to go through that particular heartbreak again. So I kept my feelings carefully locked down, even as they grew stronger with every interaction. There were moments, though. Small things that made me wonder. The way he'd find excuses to touch my arm when he was making a point. How he always seemed to position himself close to me, even when there was plenty of space. The time we were walking back to our cars after dinner, and it started raining, and he grabbed my hand to pull me under an awning, then didn't let go for several seconds after we were already sheltered. I replayed that moment 100 times, analyzing it from every angle. Was it just friendly? Was I reading too much into it? I drove myself crazy with the uncertainty. Then came the bonfire. Marcus was organizing it, because Marcus is always organizing something. It was early October, that perfect time when the evenings are cool enough to justify a fire, but not so cold that you're miserable outside. He'd rented this spot at a park on the lake, one of those designated fire pit areas, and invited about 15 people. I knew Caspian would be there. Marcus had mentioned it specifically. "You should come," he'd texted. "Caspian's bringing his guitar. Could be fun." This was new information. I didn't know Caspian played guitar. There was something about that detail that felt intimate, like I was about to learn something important about him. I showed up around 7, just as the sun was starting to set. The fire was already going, crackling and sending up sparks into the darkening sky. There were camping chairs arranged in a rough circle, a cooler full of drinks, someone's Bluetooth speaker playing something mellow in the background, and there was Caspian, crouched by the fire, poking at the logs with a stick. He looked up when I approached, and his whole face brightened. "Hey," he said, standing up and brushing ash off his jeans. "I was hoping you'd make it." That phrase. I was hoping you'd make it. I tucked it away like a treasure, something to examine later when I was alone. The evening unfolded in that easy way that good gatherings do. People told stories, passed around a bag of marshmallows for roasting, laughed at inside jokes, and created new ones. Caspian did eventually pull out his guitar. And he was good. Really good. He played this haunting fingerstyle version of a song I'd never heard before, something he said he'd been working on. I watched his hands moving across the strings, precise and confident, and felt something tighten in my chest. When he finished, everyone clapped, and he looked embarrassed in a way that was completely endearing. As the night wore on, people started pairing off into smaller conversations or wandering down to the lake to look at the water. The temperature was dropping. I was wearing just a hoodie, which had seemed sufficient earlier but was proving inadequate now. I was sitting in one of the camping chairs, a little apart from the main group, just watching the fire and feeling that pleasant melancholy that sometimes comes with autumn nights. I was thinking about Caspian, about how much I liked him, about how scared I was to do anything about it. I was thinking about how exhausting it was to constantly monitor my own behavior, making sure I wasn't being too obvious, too interested, too much. Then I felt something soft drape over my shoulders. I looked up and Caspian was standing behind me, settling a thick fleece blanket around me. "You looked cold," he said simply. Before I could thank him or respond, he walked around to the front of my chair and sat down on the ground right next to me, pulling part of the blanket over his own shoulders, so we were both cocooned in it together. Just like that. No asking if it was okay. No hesitation. He settled in close enough that our shoulders were touching. and he let out this contented sigh, like this was exactly where he wanted to be. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could feel it. We were sharing a blanket. He had chosen to sit next to me, not in one of the many empty chairs, but on the ground right beside my chair, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him through the fleece. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I didn't know where to look. The fire crackled in front of us, and someone was telling a story on the other side of the pit, and Caspian just sat there, calm and comfortable, like this was the most natural thing in the world. "This okay?" he asked after a moment, his voice quiet. "Just for me." I managed to nod. "Yeah," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "Yeah, it's perfect." And it was. It was almost unbearably perfect. I could smell his shampoo, something clean and slightly citrus. I could feel every point where our bodies made contact through the blanket. My whole nervous system was lit up like someone had plugged me directly into the electrical grid. We sat like that for a while, not talking, just existing together in the warmth of the shared blanket and the glow of the fire. Then Caspian shifted slightly, adjusting his position, and somehow in the movement, his hand ended up resting on my knee. Just resting there, casual, like it belonged there. I stopped breathing. I must have tensed up because he started to move his hand away. But without thinking, I covered it with my own, keeping it in place. The moment I did it, I panicked. That was too much. Too obvious. I'd just revealed everything. But Caspian didn't pull away. Instead, he turned his hand over under mine so our palms were touching. And then he laced his fingers through mine. He laced his fingers through mine. We were holding hands under a blanket at a bonfire, and my entire world was reorganizing itself around this fact. I looked down at our intertwined hands, then up at his face. He was already looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Nervous, maybe. Hopeful. His eyes were reflecting the firelight, and there was a question in them. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he said softly. "I just wasn't sure if you wanted me to." I almost laughed. Almost cried. Did this entire thing of trying not to seem too interested, too eager. "I've been terrified of misreading this," I admitted. "I thought maybe we were just friends and I was projecting everything else." He smiled at that. A slow, warm smile that made my stomach flip. "I'm not really in the habit of holding hands with my friends," he said, "or sharing blankets with them, or thinking about them constantly, or boring my sister with hour-long phone calls about how great they are." He talked about me to his sister. He thought about me constantly. The relief and joy that flooded through me was almost overwhelming. "I really like you," I said, because suddenly it seemed important to just say it out loud, to stop hiding. Like a lot. More than I've liked anyone in a long time. His grip on my hand tightened. "I really like you too," he said. "I have since the night we met. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you without making things weird if you didn't feel the same way." We were both idiots, basically. Two people who liked each other, dancing around it for months because we were both scared. But sitting there under that blanket with our hands intertwined and the fire warm on our faces, none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was this moment. This perfect, crystalline moment where everything became clear. "Can I kiss you?" Caspian asked. And the fact that he asked, that he wanted to make sure I wanted it too, made me like him even more. "Please," I said, and he leaned in and pressed his lips to mine. It was soft and gentle and tasted like the hot chocolate he'd been drinking earlier. It was everything a first kiss should be. When we pulled apart, he was smiling. And I was smiling. and probably we looked ridiculous sitting there grinning at each other like teenagers. But I didn't care. We stayed at the bonfire until it burned down to embers, until everyone else had left, and it was just us and Marcus, who was cleaning up and pretending not to notice that we were still holding hands under the blanket. "You two need a ride?" he asked with studied casualness. "No," Caspian said. "I think we're good." We helped Marcus load everything into his car, then walked slowly to the parking lot, still wrapped in the blanket together, even though we didn't really need it anymore. "So," Caspian said when we reached our cars, "what happens now?" I thought about it, about all the months of uncertainty, all the careful distance I'd maintained, all the feelings I'd kept locked down. I was done with all of that. "Now we go on an actual date," I said, "where we both know it's a date, where there's no ambiguity." He laughed. I'd like that. Tomorrow? Tomorrow felt impossibly far away, and also too soon. "Tomorrow," I agreed. He kissed me again before we got in our separate cars. Longer this time, his hands cupping my face like I was something precious. When I drove home, I kept touching my lips, making sure it had really happened. I texted him before I even got to my apartment. "I'm really glad you brought that blanket." He texted back immediately. "I'm really glad you let me share it." Then, after a pause, another message. "I've been carrying that blanket in my car for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." The thought of him planning this, hoping for an opportunity to be close to me, made my heart feel too big for my chest. That was 2 months ago. We've been together ever since, officially. No more ambiguity or careful distance. And I've learned that the blanket moment was just the beginning. There have been so many other moments since then. Quiet mornings in his apartment with coffee and crossword puzzles. Late-night conversations where we talk about everything and nothing. The way he kisses me goodbye like he's trying to memorize the feeling. How he holds my hand in public without hesitation. Something I'd been nervous about, but that feels completely natural with him. Last week, we were at his place, and I noticed the blanket from the bonfire folded on the back of his couch. "You kept it," I said. He looked at it, then at me, with that soft expression he gets sometimes. "Of course I kept it," he said. "It's the blanket that changed everything." And he was right. It was just a piece of fleece, worn and probably not even that warm. But it represented the moment when we both stopped being afraid, when we chose connections over safety, when we let ourselves be vulnerable enough to reach for what we wanted. I think about that night a lot. How different things could have been if Caspian hadn't been brave enough to bring me that blanket, to sit beside me, to take that first step. How close I came to never knowing what this feels like. Loving someone who loves me back just as much. Sometimes the biggest moments in our lives look like small gestures. A blanket at a bonfire. A hand reaching for yours in the dark. The courage to say what you feel instead of hiding it away. I'm not scared anymore. Well, that's not entirely true. Relationships are always a little scary, always a risk. But I'm not scared of being seen, of being known. Caspian knows me now. The real me. The one I spent so long keeping carefully hidden. And he didn't run away. He moved closer. He chose me. And I chose him. And every day I keep choosing him. And he keeps choosing me, and that's what love is, I think. A series of small choices that add up to something bigger than yourself. So yeah, a blanket changed everything. Or maybe it was never really about the blanket at all. Maybe it was about two people finally being brave enough to be honest about what they wanted. Either way, I'm grateful. For the bonfire, for the blanket, for Caspian's courage, for that perfect moment when everything shifted and became clear. For all the moments since then. and all the moments still to come.